39-year-old Arturo Cantu was ambushed by an onslaught of bullets outside his Bridgeview, Illinois apartment building one morning in May of 2024. He was getting into his car at 5 a.m. when the killer executed him in cold blood. Using surveillance footage, police identified the suspect as 20-year-old Anthony Calderon. They soon discovered that Calderon was in a secret relationship with Cantu's living girlfriend, 33-year-old Agnieszka Rydzewski, who he worked with at a local McDonald's restaurant. Rydzewski initially denied any knowledge of or involvement in Cantu's murder, but the evidence suggested otherwise. While searching her phone, detectives found conversations indicating that she and Calderon had first tried to hire someone else to kill Cantu, but Rydzewski got impatient, as evidenced by a text message she sent to Calderon stating, "I'm done waiting, I would do it myself." According to law enforcement, she pressured her younger lover to get the job done, including in a text message stating, "Time to shine, babe." Prosecutors pointed out that Rydzewski had helped Cantu apply for a $25,000 life insurance policy 2 months before his murder, leading to the suspicion that money was a motivating factor in the crime. Both Calderon and Rydzewski are facing first-degree murder charges and remain held without bail at the Cook County Jail. Number 18. Tom Perez. In August of 2018, 53-year-old Tom Perez called the local police in Fontana, California, and reported his 71-year-old father, Tom Sr., missing. The two men lived together, and Tom Sr.'s dog had returned alone the previous day after he went to retrieve the mail. Tom Jr. initially held off on reporting his father missing because he knew his dad as a fiercely independent person who often visited with neighbors. He assumed Tom Sr., nicknamed Papa Tom, was fine, but he began to worry when the elder Perez failed to return home by the following afternoon, prompting his son to contact law enforcement. To the officer who took Tom Jr.'s report, his behavior seemed off. Two cops paid a visit to the Perez home and were further taken aback by the chaotic state of the house, where Tom Jr. and Sr. had been carrying out extensive renovations. Perez agreed to go to the police station, where he was subjected to 17 hours of brutal questioning. The officers who interrogated him were initially polite, but their demeanor took a 180, roughly 90 minutes into the interview. During these grueling hours, the police brought Perez's friend and dog into the station in an apparent attempt to play on his emotions and elicit a confession to his dad's murder. In the meantime, they denied his request for medical attention.
Murdered your dad?
No, I didn't.
Yes, you did. Yeah, yes. Daddy's dead because of you.
Yeah.
Yes, not only that, but poor Morgan here.
Margot.
Sorry. Margot had a witness.
Yeah. They walked through the blood.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Yes. No.
Yeah.
Yes.
The cops even convinced Perez's friend to aid in their efforts to get him to confess. Acting under the interrogator's instructions, the friend told Perez that law enforcement had found a blood-soaked crime scene, only to later overhear the police talking about how the evidence was purely circumstantial. Feeling both mentally and physically exhausted, Perez began to wonder if it was possible that he had harmed his father. Even though he had no recollection of doing so, he had a nervous breakdown and admitted to a murder he had not committed, and was taken to a psychiatric emergency room due to his emotional state. His beloved dog was surrendered to an animal shelter as a stray. By the time Tom Jr. was taken to the hospital, his father had been found alive and well, but the police didn't inform him of this and continued to treat him as a criminal suspect. Meanwhile, Tom Sr. frantically tried to locate his son. Unaware that Tom Jr. was at the hospital, the Perezes were reunited a week later and got their dog back, but were left traumatized by the ordeal, and the police continued to surveil Tom Jr., believing that he had harmed someone and the victim had yet to be discovered. Tom Jr. sued the city and received a $900,000 settlement, but the police never apologized and adamantly denied any wrongdoing. Some of the officers involved in the botched interrogation have even been promoted, leaving Tom Jr. wondering to this day why he received such appalling treatment from the very people he had contacted for help. Number 17. Sharon Graham. While responding to a rural property in Queensland, Australia, in November 2017, police found the legs of 54-year-old Bruce Saunders protruding from a wood chipper Officers initially treated his death as a tragic accident, but further investigation revealed that Saunders had been bludgeoned over the head and forced into the machine. On the day of the murder, Saunders had been clearing trees at the remote site in Goomborian with his ex-wife Sharon Graham's fiancé, Gregory Lee Rosa, and Pete Koenig, who was also having an intimate relationship with the victim's former spouse. To make the situation even more complicated, Saunders and Graham still lived together but slept in separate bedrooms. Months earlier, Graham had recruited Koenig and Rosa to kill Saunders, hoping to cash in on a $750,000 life insurance policy. She told the men to make it look like an accident. Koenig would later testify that he and Rosa agreed to the plan, but that he had only said yes to appease Graham and had no intentions on following through with it. A week before the murder, Graham asked Koenig and Rosa why Saunders hadn't been killed yet. They told her that the wood chipper was malfunctioning and that there were too many people around, but Graham insisted that the murder needed to be carried out, and the men did as they were told. Koenig pleaded guilty to being an accessory to murder and agreed to testify against Rosa and Graham in exchange for leniency. During Rosa's trial, Koenig testified that the defendant beat Saunders over the head with a metal pipe and that they worked together to feed the victim's body into the wood chipper. Rosa and Graham were found guilty of murder in separate trials and are serving life sentences. Number 16. John Anthony Scharringhausen. In January of 2020, 30-year-old Anthony Sanks was gunned down in the parking lot of a San Antonio apartment complex. Shortly before his murder, he had exchanged text messages and phone calls with 22-year-old John Anthony Scharringhausen. It appeared as though the two men had planned to commit a violent crime together that day. Their target was a man Scharringhausen had tried to murder just months earlier. The victim had survived, and in a surprising twist, he made peace with Scharringhausen and convinced him to kill Sanks, who he believed had ordered the attempt on his life. According to police, Sanks exited his apartment to meet with Scharringhausen, believing they were about to go attack someone else. Scharringhausen fired 10 gunshots at Sanks, who was already dead by the time a witness discovered the scene. 2 weeks later, the man Scharringhausen had conspired with was shot dead, and it's believed that Scharringhausen may have been involved in the murder. He was convicted of killing Sanks in 2021 and was sentenced to 40 years in prison. Number 15. Jacobean Brown. On the night of February 21st, 2023, 18-year-old Jacobean Brown climbed through high school student Madison Guesswine's bedroom window in Peachtree City, Georgia, and shot her in the head as she lay in bed. Guesswine's mother found her dead in a pool of blood the next morning. Police arrested Brown the following day after a brief foot chase along with 2 accomplices, 18-year-olds Justice Smith and Yeshua Mathis. Smith and Mathis had accompanied Brown to the murder scene after he and Guesswine had argued the previous night. The trio brought cleaning supplies with them, leading detectives to believe that they may have planned to conceal or destroy evidence. In a letter to the judge overseeing his case, Brown pleaded to be released on bond. He claimed that he wanted to pursue his GED and promised that the judge wouldn't regret the decision to free him, but he remained in pre-trial detention, and the prosecutor described the letter as a thinly veiled attempt to manipulate the system. In July of 2024, Brown was found guilty of murder, aggravated assault, and a gun charge. He was sentenced to life without parole plus 6 years. In a surprising turn of events, a jury acquitted Yeshua Mathis on all counts after listening to his heartfelt testimony about how he had tried to stop Brown from killing Guesswine. He claimed that they had brought cleaning supplies because they planned to prank Guesswine by squirting her with soap, and insisted that he never entered the apartment. The Fayette County District Attorney's Office said that it disagreed with but respected the jury's verdict, and that prosecutors had presented overwhelming evidence of Mathis's guilt. Justice Smith is still awaiting trial, which is scheduled to take place sometime in 2025. Number 14. Valerie Hayes and Jennifer Amnott. In July of 2018, a group of 4 criminals plotted to abduct 5 children from a Mennonite community in Virginia. They concocted the unusual plan after Valerie Perfect Hayes contacted her friends, married Florida couple Frank and Jennifer Amnott, and claimed that the Mennonites had abducted 3 of her children. This was untrue, and the Amnotts were also under the false impression that Hayes worked for a top-secret government intelligence organization. Knowing the Amnotts were unable to have biological children, Hayes asked them to help her retrieve her kids, promising that they could kidnap an additional Mennonite child for the couple to keep and raise as their own. They agreed, and the trio proceeded to plot their next moves with help from Hayes' boyfriend, Gary Blake Rayburn. Hayes, Rayburn, and Frank Amnott planned to steal 2 children from 2 households and kill the kids' parents, but they failed miserably when one of the parents fled into a field and dialed 911. Police arrived at the scene before the trio could carry out their second planned home invasion. Rayburn was held in custody while the other 3 suspects were released with pending charges. Hayes and the Amnotts fled to the United Kingdom, where they lived with an unsuspecting woman who had no idea that they were wanted fugitives until their capture 4 months later. The trio remained in the UK for nearly 3 years before a judge ordered their deportation back to the US in the fall of 2021, by which point Rayburn had been convicted of his role in the kidnapping plot and was serving a life sentence. According to the most recent available updates from 2022, Hayes and the Amnotts were appealing their extradition, further putting their deportation on hold. The current status of the case is unclear. Number 13. Carmen Stonemark. 76-year-old real estate entrepreneur Frank Stonemark vanished in Carbondale, Illinois during the fall of 2017. He was reported by his much younger wife of 7 years, Carmen, who told police that Frank had left after an argument. It wasn't unlike him to give himself and Carmen some space to cool off during their disagreements, but it was extremely out of character for him to be gone for long, and concerns over his well-being grew as hours turned into days. Frank's ex-wife had no knowledge of his whereabouts, and there was no record of him using his passport to travel to the Dominican Republic like Carmen had suggested to investigators. The plot thickened when a business associate said that Frank had recently asked him for several loans. At one point, the friend noticed that Frank seemed to be in a daze and had blood on his face. Carmen claimed that Frank was having money problems due to a gambling addiction, but he hadn't used his casino club card in more than 2 years. Detectives soon discovered that Carmen had had multiple affairs with maintenance men who worked for Frank. The cheating had taken a toll on the Stonemarks' marriage, and Carmen became a top person of interest in the case. In March of 2018, nearly 5 months after Frank vanished, his abandoned van was found in a store parking lot in Kentucky. There was blood on the interior, indicating that a struggle had taken place. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, police received a phone call from one of Frank's handymen, 52-year-old James Michael Deese. He admitted to having an affair with Carmen and confessed that he had strangled Frank to death at Carmen's urging. Carmen supposedly told Deese that they couldn't be together unless Frank was dead, resulting in his decision to kill the senior citizen. He and Carmen dumped the corpse 20 miles away and retrieved it months later. They dismembered and burned the remains, but investigators uncovered enough evidence of the body to confirm that it belonged to Frank. Deese pleaded guilty to first-degree murder later that year in exchange for a 25-year sentence, which he'll have to serve in its entirety before he's released. Carmen took a plea deal in 2021 and is serving 25 years for solicitation to commit murder and concealment of a homicidal death. Number 12. Kyle Fedus. On July 5, 2024, the body of 30-year-old Elise Marie Betts was found face down in a storage unit in Edmond, Oklahoma. She had been reported missing out of North Carolina the previous month by her family, who said that she had been seeking treatment for alcohol addiction in the wake of her mother's death. There was no obvious trauma to Betts' body, making it difficult for police to speculate on her cause of death as they awaited autopsy results. In the meantime, detectives learned that Betts had been staying at a nearby hotel with a 36-year-old man she barely knew named Kyle Fedus. When an officer paid a visit to their hotel room, Fedus tried to walk away. He denied being Kyle Fedus and ran from the room, but was tackled in a hallway.
Stop! What are you arresting me for?
Put your hands behind your back!
Stop for what? Stop resisting.
Let it go.
What? What would I be arrested for? Stop! What are you arresting me for?
Fedus claimed that Betts was responsible for her own demise as part of a bizarre agreement the two had made and which he had survived. Betts' family did not believe this version of events, and the investigation's findings seemed to support their doubts. The victim's sister, Laura Beckman, told local news station KWTV that she believed Fedus had manipulated Betts into being kidnapped and that he had murdered her sister, whom she described as an easy target. Fedus claimed to be Betts' boyfriend, but Beckman denied that this was the case. Police visited Fedus on a federal probation violation and he was later charged with murder. He remains held without bond at the Oklahoma County Jail and authorities have yet to reveal Betts' cause of death. Number 11. Gavin McFarlane and Ellie Friar. 50-year-old Aaron Friar and his teenage daughter Ellie Friar were reported missing on October 2, 2017 after other household members awoke to a loud crashing at the family's Medford, Oregon home. A bloody scene had been left behind, and one of Aaron's other daughters told police that she had recognized the voice of Ellie's boyfriend, 19-year-old Gavin McFarlane, during the loud incident that had woken the family up about a month earlier. Aaron had forbidden Ellie from continuing to see McFarlane. At around the same time, McFarlane had called 911 and accused Aaron of threatening him. Shortly after Aaron and Ellie disappeared, police found McFarlane, Ellie, and 22-year-old Russell Jones II walking down the street. During questioning, Ellie accused Aaron of abusing her and revealed that Jones had attacked her father with a machete. She claimed she had no idea that Jones was going to harm Aaron, but investigators suspected that she was fully in on the plan. Meanwhile, in another interrogation room, Jones denied the machete attack and accused McFarlane of killing Aaron with a baseball bat. He admitted to helping McFarlane get rid of the body and led police to the dump site. An autopsy found that Aaron had been bludgeoned to death. Discrediting Ellie's version of events, McFarlane confessed to the murder, telling police that Ellie was pregnant and that he believed Aaron was abusing her. He said he was just trying to protect Ellie, but also identified her as the mastermind of Aaron's murder. Investigators soon established that Ellie wasn't pregnant, and they never found any evidence of Aaron abusing his children, leading them to suspect that Ellie wanted her father dead so she could continue dating McFarlane. Prosecutors accused Ellie of using the pregnancy and abuse story to prey on McFarlane's emotions, knowing he would likely feel compelled to take action against Aaron. But the young woman's defense attorney insisted that Aaron really was abusive and accused McFarlane of manipulating Ellie into going along with the murder. Ellie pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit murder in 2019 and was sentenced to 25 years in prison. McFarlane is serving 25 years to life for a homicide conviction, and Jones received an 11-year term for conspiracy and burglary charges. Number 10. Robyn Lindholm. The decomposing body of Australian gym owner Wayne Amy was found more than a week after he vanished in the Melbourne suburb of Hawthorne. In December 2013, he had been stabbed, strangled, and bludgeoned to death in his basement. The killers, John Ryan and Torsten Treibert, were connected to the crime through surveillance footage and reports from eyewitnesses who claimed that the pair had confessed to murdering Amy. Both men were romantically involved with the victim's ex-partner, 40-year-old Robyn Lindholm, who was accused of manipulating the men into carrying out the killing. Ryan and Treibert pointed the finger at each other but were both prosecuted for Amy's murder. Lindholm was also charged in connection with the case. All three defendants were found guilty, and Lindholm received a 25-year term while Torsten and Ryan were sentenced to 28 and 31 years respectively. In 2005, 8 years before his own death, Amy had murdered another one of Lindholm's previous partners, George Templeton, whose body was never found. Amy was never charged with the crime, which didn't go to court until 2019. Lindholm was found guilty of her role in masterminding Templeton's murder and was sentenced to 28 years in prison. Her two murder sentences will overlap and Lindholm will become eligible for parole at the age of 71. Number 9. Benjamin Field. While hospitalized in Buckinghamshire, England with an illness in early 2017, 83-year-old Anne Moore Martin told her niece that she was in an intimate relationship with an unemployed man in his mid-20s named Benjamin Field. This immediately set off alarm bells for the elderly woman's niece, who suspected that Field was taking advantage of her lonely aunt. She contacted law enforcement, and investigators soon discovered that Field had duped Moore Martin into making him the beneficiary of her will by manipulating and drugging the senior citizen. Moore Martin had also given Field more than $38,000 for a new car in his efforts to manipulate the aging victim. Field had written messages from God on the mirrors throughout her home. Thanks to the diligent efforts of Moore Martin's niece, however, the fraud was detected with enough time for the old woman to remove Field from her will before she passed away just a few months later. During the investigation, detectives took a closer look at the suspicious death of Moore Martin's next-door neighbor, 69-year-old Peter Farquhar, who had passed away 2 years earlier in October 2015. Investigators had initially concluded that Farquhar had succumbed to alcohol poisoning, but they realized while revisiting the case that he had been poisoned and strangled to death. They also discovered that Field had seduced Farquhar in a bid to convince the elderly gentleman to give him $25,000, which he put toward the purchase of a flat. Authorities charged Field with defrauding Moore Martin and Farquhar's murder. In court, prosecutors accused the defendant of lacing Farquhar's food with drugs and spiking his drinks with extremely strong alcohol as part of a scheme to gaslight the senior citizen into believing that he was losing his mind. In 2019, Field was found guilty of Farquhar's murder and pleaded guilty to multiple fraud and burglary counts in connection with the deceptive relationships. He was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 36 years. Number 8. Erin Caffey. 16-year-old Erin Caffey quickly fell head over heels for her 18-year-old boyfriend, Charlie Wilkinson, after they met in 2007. But her church-going parents, Terry and Penny, disapproved of the young man and forbade Erin from continuing to see Wilkinson after she broke her phone curfew several months into the relationship. Determined to continue the relationship, Erin decided that her parents had to die. On March 1st, 2008, the couple drove to the Caffey family home in Alba, Texas with their friend Charles Wade and his girlfriend, Bobby Gail Johnson. Armed with a gun and a machete, Wilkinson and Wade went inside and attacked Terry, Penny, and Erin's 2 younger brothers, Tyler and Matthew. Believing the 4 victims were all dead, the teens proceeded to raid the home of valuables before setting it on fire and fleeing the scene. But Terry Caffey had survived the attack and mustered enough strength to crawl to a neighbor's house for help. After undergoing emergency surgery, he was able to tell emergencies who had killed his wife and sons. Within 24 hours of the murders, all 4 suspects were in custody. Erin, who was found at Wilkinson's trailer home, claimed she had been kidnapped, but the other suspects also talked and her abduction story quickly fell apart. Both Wade and Wilkinson told detectives that the murders were Erin's idea, and Wilkinson claimed that he had suggested running away together as an alternative to killing the Caffeys. Each of the 4 suspects was charged with 3 counts of capital murder. Bobby Gail Johnson was sentenced to 40 years in prison for a lesser charge and will become eligible for parole in 2028, while Wilkinson and Wade pleaded guilty in order to avoid the death penalty and received life sentences. Erin also took a plea deal and was sentenced to 2 life terms plus 25 years with the possibility of parole. She's now 33 years old and will be 47 when she becomes eligible for parole in 2038. Terry Caffey forgave his daughter for her actions and visits her in prison. He struggled with depression for a long time after the murders, but eventually remarried and has 4 children with his current wife. Number 7. Sarah Mohamed. In 2019, 17-year-old Sarah Mohamed discovered that her boyfriend, Rhett Carty Shaw, was cheating on her with the mother of his child, Iman Nasir. She ended the relationship, but Carty Shaw pleaded for another chance. Mohamed told him that he needed to prove his commitment to her if he wanted her to even consider taking him back. In May of 2019, Carty Shaw went to Nasir's home in Manchester, England, and tried stabbing her to death. She survived with serious injuries, and Carty Shaw was arrested on suspicion of attempted murder. During a search of his cell phone, investigators discovered a text message he had sent to Mohamed stating that he had attacked Nasir to prove his love for her, added, "There was no other way to keep you." Mohamed replied, "I know there wasn't," and promised to protect him at all costs. She denied any knowledge that Carty Shaw was going to physically harm Nasir, claiming that she had sent him to the victim's house to break up with her and demand that he record the conversation later that year. Carty Shaw was found guilty of attempted murder and sentenced to 16 years in prison. Mohamed was convicted of intentionally encouraging or assisting a person to commit murder and is also serving a 16-year sentence. Number 6. Lloyd Neurauter. 46-year-old mother of 3, Michelle Neurauter, was found murdered in her Corning, New York home on August 28, 2017. Someone had strangled her to death and staged the scene to appear as if no foul play had occurred. At the time of her death, Michelle was entangled in a years-long child custody battle with her ex-husband Lloyd, making him a prime person of interest in the case. Lloyd had failed to obtain custody of their youngest daughter and was tired of paying court-ordered support to Michelle. The former couple's 19-year-old daughter, Carrie, vouched for her father's alibi, claiming that Lloyd had helped her move into her college dorm on the day of the murder, and that he never left the hotel where they had spent the night. But the hotel surveillance footage showed Lloyd leaving with Carrie in her car, and he didn't return until the next morning. Investigators wiretapped their phones and were shocked to learn that Lloyd had persuaded Carrie to distract her younger sister while he killed Michelle. Carrie pleaded guilty to second-degree murder in 2018, but the judge reduced her conviction to second-degree manslaughter after Lloyd admitted to detectives that he had manipulated his daughter for 4 years leading up to Michelle's death. She was sentenced to 1 to 3 years in prison and was released in early 2020. Less than 2 weeks before he was scheduled to go to trial, Lloyd pleaded guilty to first-degree murder, custodial interference, and conspiracy. During his sentencing hearing, he admitted that he had coerced Carrie into assisting with Michelle's murder by threatening his own demise if she refused. In an arguably rare decision for a New York State murder case, the judge sentenced Lloyd to the maximum of life without the possibility of parole. Number 5. Thomas Randolph. 4 of Thomas Randolph's 6 wives died under suspicious circumstances, earning him the nickname of the Black Widower. His second wife, Becky Galt, succumbed to a gunshot wound in 1983 during an alleged struggle with mental illness and cocaine addiction. Randolph was quick to cash in on a $250,000 life insurance policy that had been taken out in her name and was eventually charged with Galt's murder. He was ultimately acquitted of the crime even after a former friend testified that Randolph had tried hiring him to kill Galt. In 2004, Randolph's 4th wife, Frances, died in a hospital after undergoing heart surgery. Randolph blamed the hospital, claiming that the operation was botched, and was never charged in connection with Frances's death. During his trial for a different wife's murder years later, a witness would testify that Randolph had tried hiring him to kill Frances, while the woman's daughter told the court that she always believed Randolph was responsible for her mother's death. Randolph's 5th wife, Leona Stapleton, supposedly died from cancer. His 6th wife, Sharon Graham, was shot dead in the couple's Las Vegas home in 2008. Police arrived to find Sharon dead at the scene along with the body of Randolph's handyman, Michael Miller, in what initially appeared to be a home burglary gone wrong. Prosecutors accused Randolph of hiring Miller to kill Sharon, then killing Miller to ensure he could never talk about the crime. The state argued that Randolph killed Sharon for life insurance payouts totaling $300,000 that had been taken out in her name. Randolph was found guilty of Sharon and Miller's murder and sentenced to death, but he challenged the case and his conviction was overturned. During his retrial in 2023, his surviving 1st and 3rd wives testified to his manipulative and abusive ways. His own children also testified against him, and the jury once again found him guilty of both murders, landing him a 60-year prison sentence. Number 4. Demontrae Hardman. A disagreement between 2 Michigan men ended in murder in April 2022 when 29-year-old Demontrae Hardman fatally shot 18-year-old Isaiah Zay Danks at a Saginaw apartment. The men had met for the first time earlier that day while hanging out with a group of mutual friends and had gotten along well until the argument broke out. Hardman fled the scene in a vehicle with a female relative who had witnessed the shooting. He was nevertheless identified as the prime suspect in the case and was charged with murder. While awaiting trial, he pressured at least 2 witnesses not to testify, including his relative he had fled the scene with, whom he had threatened to kill if she took the stand. Hardman offered to pay another witness in exchange for their refusal to testify, but both witnesses participated in the trial and were later praised for their bravery. The accused killer claimed that he had acted in self-defense, but the jury found him guilty of second-degree murder and various other charges, including multiple gun-related counts and 2 counts of witness intimidation. Hardman was sentenced to 50 to 80 years in prison. He'll be in his early 80s when he becomes eligible for parole in the year 2076. Number 3. Chelsea Watrous Cook. In November of 2018, 32-year-old high school health teacher Chelsea Watrous Cook contacted her ex-husband, Travis Cook, and told him she was dropping by his apartment in Midvale, Utah, with cold medicine for their twins. When Travis came out into the parking lot, she snuck into his home, where the twins were helping his girlfriend, Lisa Villate Williams, decorate their Christmas tree. Chelsea locked herself in a bathroom and refused to leave while Travis called 911. Less than a minute later, she emerged from the bathroom and shot Williams multiple times in front of the kids. Travis restrained Chelsea until police arrived, and Williams died from her injuries at a nearby hospital. According to Williams' family, Chelsea had harassed the victim on numerous prior occasions. She pleaded guilty to aggravated murder, aggravated burglary, and other charges in order to avoid the death penalty, and was sentenced to 34 years to life. Today's topic was requested by God Emperor Doom 616. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Josephine Gray. At least 3 Maryland men were shot to death after becoming involved with school janitor Josephine Gray between the mid-1970s and the mid-1990s, earning her a reputation as the so-called Black Widow of Baltimore. Gray's first husband, Norman Striblin, was killed along a quiet Gaithersburg road in 1975. Her second husband, William Robert Gray, was gunned down in 1990 as he entered his Germantown apartment. 6 years later, in 1996, Gray's 28-year-old cousin and lover, Clarence Goody, was found dead in his car along a Baltimore street. According to law enforcement, Gray had a pattern of persuading her lovers to kill her victims. She cashed in on life insurance policies after all 3 deaths, benefiting to the tune of $165,000. Authorities tried pursuing criminal charges against her twice during the 90s, but the cases fell apart when her relatives either couldn't be found or refused to testify as witnesses. They were seemingly afraid of Gray not only due to her alleged murderous tendencies, but because she practiced witchcraft. Gray denied being a witch and accused her family members of being jealous. But their fear undeniably worked in her favor until 2002, when federal authorities charged her with 8 counts of wire and mail fraud for collecting the insurance payouts. This served as a way to hold Gray accountable for her 2 husbands' deaths in a situation where prosecutors were unable to prove a murder charge. Later that year, Gray was convicted of 5 counts of mail fraud and 3 counts of wire fraud. She was sentenced to 40 years in federal prison, which prosecutors believed would ensure that she'd remain in prison for life. But in a surprising twist, Gray was suddenly released in December 2024 as part of President Joe Biden's historic clemency initiative. The decision to free the 78-year-old angered prosecutor James Trusty, who told the Washington Free Beacon that Gray's release contradicts Biden's claim that clemency is only being granted to non-violent offenders. Number 1. Belligerent boyfriend batterer. On June 9th, 2023, police in Wilton Manors, Florida, responded to a reported altercation between a man and woman outside a local bar. A shirtless man with bleeding injuries told officers that his girlfriend of 5 or 6 months had physically attacked him when she saw him text messaging another female. He also said he tried to stop her from driving, presumably due to her alcohol intake, but that she got into the driver's seat of her vehicle anyway. Officers located a woman in her vehicle and asked her for her side of the story. She tearfully and repetitively said that her boyfriend acted like he didn't know what was going on when he really did, but she didn't go into detail about what she meant, and she kept making nonsensical statements which made her seem intoxicated. Meanwhile, a witness told law enforcement that he had seen the woman beating the you-know-what out of her boyfriend while he yelled for help and told her to stop. The witness was adamant that he had not seen the man act aggressive toward his girlfriend, and that the irate woman had kept opening the door of his vehicle and attacking him while he was trying to get away.
What happened?
Yeah,
Let's go over here.
I didn't see him do anything to her.
Where they were parked there the whole time?
For the most part, I kept hearing the yelling and screaming.
Okay.
But he was in the car, and she was beating the shit out of him with the phone, as you can see.
Where was she? Was she in the driver or passenger?
No, he was in the driver's seat.
Okay.
And she kept opening the door, attacking him. And he just kept saying, stop, help.
She was coming around and...
She was coming around, opening the door, slamming the door.
Yeah.
I didn't see him at all be aggressive. At all.
So tell me what happened, okay? You got to tell me your side, or we got to go off that. Evidence is pointing again. You have to articulate what happened in order to debunk the evidence. You have to tell me what happened.
You're full of blood and he has scratches, so you have to tell us what happened, what you did, what happened in the car, so that we can have 2 sides of the story.
Right now, we just have our evidence.
As the woman continued failing to articulate a coherent and detailed version of events, an officer told her that the evidence pointed toward a domestic battery charge. Her boyfriend was hesitant to press charges, telling police that she had a drinking problem and normally wasn't aggressive. He became extremely upset when a responding officer explained that the couple had to at least separate for the night and that his girlfriend was going to be arrested. The woman was charged with battery and resisted an officer without violence. Thanks for watching. If you had the power to magically alter the outcome of the national election in your country to reflect your personal preference, would you use it? And why or why not? Let us know in the comment section below.